All right, our last item on the agenda will be no stranger to those of us who have spent time in recent weeks and months on Capitol Hill. As you will recall from the summaries yesterday morning in my plenary remarks and in the update on the Committee on External Engagement, skilled technical workforce issues are a hot topic in many congressional offices. Before I turn this over to Vic McCrary to MC the panel, let me introduce our panelists. Mr. Dallas Elliman is an undergraduate engineering physics robotics student at the University of Tulsa. He transferred from Tulsa Community College after earning an associate degree in electrical engineering, physics, and math. Dallas participated in the National Science Foundation's Community College Innovation Challenge 3 times. Dr. Mel Cosette is the Executive Director and Principal Investigator for the NSF-funded National Resource Center for Materials Technology Education, housed at Edmonds Community College in Linwood, Washington. Mr. Matt Glover is the CTO for Level, a mid-market health and wellness company in Texas. Matt serves as chairman of the Business Industry Leadership Team for the National Convergence Technology Center, which is responsible for guiding the curriculum for more than 60 colleges nationally. A more detailed biography of our 3 guests is in your materials. Thank you all for agreeing to speak with us today about this important topic. Now let me turn the floor over to Vic.
Thank you, Maria. Let me join Maria in welcoming Mel, Matt, and Dallas, and thank them for joining us today to discuss this very important topic. Before turning it over to our distinguished panel, let me make a few comments about the purpose of this panel and how it fits in the overall work plan of this project. Our work plan describes the objectives of the project this way: to identify opportunities and challenges with respect to the skilled technical workforce, and 2, identify how the federal government generally and NSF specifically can help seize opportunities and mitigate challenges. This information is in your diligent board book. Currently, the board is gathering information. At our February meeting, we held our first conversation on this project. In May, we heard from Jim Lewis and Celeste Carter about NSF investments in this area. Today, we'll hear from people closely involved with the skilled technical workforce: a student, an educator, and an ATE principal investigator, and a business executive. In October, we will travel to Louisiana to hold our first public listening session on the skilled technical workforce. I'd like to especially thank our working group members, Jerry, Vicki, Carl, our NSF experts. Shout out specifically to Celeste Carter and Susan Brennan, and the NPO staff, particularly Matt Wilson and Reba, and for all their work on this project thus far. We could not have been able to get this far and make this progress without them. Today's panel is a critical part of our information gathering activities. We have asked Mel, Matt, and Dallas to share their experiences in this area, the challenges they've faced, and the opportunities they've encountered, and more importantly, how can NSF make a positive difference, or have made a positive difference? Each panelist will have about 7 minutes to offer any prepared remarks, and then we'll have about 30 minutes for a broader conversation and discussion. And in the order we'll take it, we'll start with from the student's perspective, then from the educator's perspective, and then from the industry perspective. So with that, I'll turn it over to you first, Dallas Elliman.
Thanks very much for allowing me to be a part of this. The National Science Foundation has affected me and my academic progress personally in a very strong way, but I've also seen the way that it's affected other students, so I'm glad to give back in any way that I can and help you learn about it from the student perspective. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story, try to give you the short, sweet version of it, and then talk to you about some insights and perspectives that I've gained along the way, and then also about how the NSF has impacted me and my experience. Start out, I guess, with my high school. So I was a fairly high-performing high school student. I didn't have a whole lot of focus or direction. I didn't know what an engineer was or what scientists did. And I also felt like I was sort of not very well-rounded, so I wanted to go into like blue-collar construction type field and round out some of those skills. So I I spent some time doing construction, tree work, like hotel maintenance, other semi-skilled technical jobs along the way. And fast forward to about the age of 30, I've got 3 kids, and I'm trying to provide support as a cable technician, so installing people's cable and telephone service, crawling through attics. And it was probably crawling through an attic that I realized I didn't want to be crawling through attics my whole life. So, but also that I came to the realization I probably could be doing something better for the world than installing cable, maybe. So I decided to go back to school. And there are a lot of other workers back at the cable company where I worked, who are in kind of the same boat. They would like to be able to improve themselves, and also once the company would train us with the technical skills we'd need to get the job done, but it's not exactly a dead end. I mean, you can further your career that way, but college really is an attractive way to make yourself more marketable in different areas, or to be able to move up. So there are a lot of other cable technicians that are trying to do the same thing, and community college is a really great way to do that. So I enrolled in my local community college. And as a working parent, so I was working full-time, trying to be a full-time dad, spend time with my kids too, and taking classes. Luckily, the community college I went to had some distance learning online classes. That really helped out a lot. But funding was also an issue, and just being able to spend the time studying instead of having to work overtime to get the bills paid. So there were several different things. I wanted to try to take advantage of as many financial opportunities as I could as far as scholarships and grants. National Science Foundation funded a grant for STEM majors at my community college, and there were some base requirements as far as GPA and participation. You had to be involved with a mentor on the STEM faculty. That was really great. And also, there was a requirement that throughout the semester, we attended a minimum number of science and technology-focused events that were held, and through some of those events, I learned of another opportunity in my school that was also funded partially. It was Oklahoma EPSCoR grant. So 3 students. I joined this class. 3 of the students from this class were chosen to do internships at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and so I learned about this through the National Science Foundation grant program. Got into the class and was also able to go to JPL and do an internship there. And that was just like mind-blowing. Amazing. It really opened me up to what is possible out there for community college students to do. And it's not an opportunity that's offered to many community college students, but so that got me passionate about science. I came back from that experience, and that was the first year that the National Science Foundation announced their Community College Innovation Challenge competition. So I helped to get a team together, and we were selected as finalists. And coming here, my first exposure to the National Science Foundation, again, I didn't know what what NSF did, what their mission was. But just that experience, it broadened my perspective and made me more passionate and appreciative for science education and what the NSF does. So besides that, I got a great introduction to entrepreneurship and getting research out of the lab and into the marketplace. That's the CCIC. And then I was the presenter in front of a panel of judges for that competition, and I choked really bad. So I wanted to redeem myself. I put together another team, but I was ineligible to come back and participate as a student. So instead, I got a job with their industry partner. I got hired on by them, and I'm still working for them. So the National Science Foundation, just following the breadcrumbs, kind of has opened up so many doors for me, and I know that it benefits other students in the same kind of way. They just have to be able to take the initiative to be able to see the value up front, and then just say yes and go with it. So some of the things I've seen along the way, community college students, I haven't met a whole lot of them that are very passionate about what they're learning. It's hard, or it's rare to find students who know exactly what they want to do right out of the gate. And so also the classes that we take, following a curriculum, doing the homework assignments step by step, is not really all that inspiring of like passion for science, in my experience anyway. But competitions like the National Science Foundation Innovation Challenge, that's a free-form creative project. You get to work with your friends outside of classroom hours. You get into it, you get out of it whatever you put in, and it's just such a great extracurricular activity that I would encourage any other students. And I've made presentations in my school trying to get other students interested in it and respond to the challenge, the NSF challenge. So that's been a really great experience for me, and I know it can be for other students too. But some of the pushback that I get from students is students at community colleges or skilled technical workers, blue-collar STEM workers, they want to see a practical payoff for whatever it is that they're doing. And if you can't get some kind of a reward for a participation in an activity, sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself, especially if you've got your kids at home or you've got bills to pay. So the financial incentive of the Innovation Challenge was instrumental in motivating me to take the initiative. And I really think that if exposed to the right conditions in environments like the National Science Foundation can provide for students who may have not had exposure, it can really flip a switch. Like students who may not see themselves as scientists or engineers or is a STEM worker can suddenly, their eyes are open to a new possibility for themselves, and like with me. So I hope that the NSF can keep doing those types of things. So I mentioned some of the obstacles for me personally: time and money, also passion and direction for students. But the technological landscape of the job market is changing rapidly. Everybody knows it's evolving, faster than it ever has before. And so sometimes it's hard for students to know exactly what to put their energy into learning, and it's even more difficult for the academic curriculum at a community college or even the university that I'm at right now to adapt quickly enough to be able to incorporate the new technologies, the most cutting edge things. So any way that the National Science Foundation can encourage experimentation or sort of diversification of the types of technologies that are either taught in schools or and another. I keep coming back to the competition. So the Innovation Challenge. I'm almost out of time here. So the Innovation Challenge basically was an open-ended challenge for students to come up with a solution to some kind of a problem that they saw in the world that they were concerned about or wanted to help solve. And that's such an open-ended challenge that what we do is we go out and try to find solutions in the real world. And instead of being stuck in a book that's got limitations, there's no limit to what we can use, and do research, try to think of new ways, bounce ideas off each other. It's a really creative and collaborative process that isn't enabled in the classroom. So when I talk to teachers, I try to, if I encourage them to help students get into extracurricular activities like that, sometimes it's difficult. They want to be able to teach everything inside a classroom, but there's just some things you can't teach, or some things that have to be learned experientially, I guess. As far as I've mentioned how the NSF investments have helped me personally to overcome obstacles, just giving me the time and sort of the breathing room to not have to work overtime. But then, nationally, how do the National Science Foundation's efforts and investments into the skilled technical workforce promote the progress of science for the nation? And I would say that anything that the NSF can do to help students become more science literate, help the next generation appreciate science and not be skeptical or distrustful of science. Anything you can put out there to push the conversation forward will be helpful. And I'm not familiar. This is my first exposure to the National Science Board too, so I'm not really sure what kind of power you guys have or what you can do and stuff. But you have the power to recommend policy, and you have people you can talk to and stuff. So just from my personal experience, I would recommend that you empower or somehow help the National Science Foundation to catalyze the expansion of the Community College Innovation Challenges to be able to provide the experience for more students at the community college level, and also maybe even push it down to high school level. So at the University of Tulsa, this is the last thing I'll finish up here. Just from my experience with the Innovation Challenge, I helped to put together an Innovation Challenge for high school students last year, and we're expanding it to the entire state of Oklahoma this year. So, but the earlier you can get that started, and the sooner you can get that ball rolling, the better. So again, thank you very, very much for having all of us here. I'm glad to help out in any way that I can. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And just for point of reference, all the power is at that end of the table. So our next speaker will be Dr. Mel Cassette.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us here, all three of us. I think it's an honor to be here. I'm going to kind of go more into the industry side of the house and education. And I think Dallas, you've done a great job about framing it. So I'm not going to repeat some of the things you said because I totally agree with them. And if you want to know what those are, you can ask me later. But what I did want to start is where Dallas started. I too was a student in high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I took all the little exams and tests that you take for interest, and I scored very highly in science, math, and engineering. Yet when I went to talk to my high school counselor, they told me that I was going to be a child care aide. That's all I could do because I was Latina, I was Mexican at the time, and I was the only Mexican in my entire high school. So it put me in an odd situation, but having parents who guide me, kind of like, you decide you want to do something. I went to my parents and I said, do you think this is the right thing to do? And they said, no. So I went to a mentor who I had known for quite some time, and she said, no, this is what you're going to do. You're a female, you're into math, science, engineering, you have a 4.0, you're going to the Atomic Energy Commission, and you're going to do an internship, which is what I did. And that opened the door to many things, to many prospects, to many opportunities, many jobs throughout my life. But what I want to talk about here is my start to NSF, my start within ATE. And it all started when I decided I was at the college system, and I decided I wanted to go back into industry. I'd spent 25 years in industry. During that last 5 years, I received my master's in education. I decided to go back to industry for a little while to see kind of what had changed, because I always felt like if I was going to work with students and teachers and helping other teachers work with other students, I really need to know what was going on and what had changed in the technologies of the world and where was I at. So I decided to go to the state board and say, is there anything out there that's going on in the state of Washington? And they said, the Boeing company is having some issues trying to find someone who knows industry, has been in education, and is very familiar with union organizations, which I was because my father was a union organizer at the time, and my mother was an interpreter for the court system. So I got to learn a lot about the world, and so I would go with them to these different meetings because my parents did not believe in babysitters. So we would go, and they'd put us in corners, and we would sit there and do our homework and learn about real world. So they said yes, and so I went and applied to the Boeing company, and they absolutely took me in a heartbeat because they'd been having a problem trying to find someone who could do the three pieces. Although education was always my love, I really did enjoy doing the engineering side of the house, so I saw this as a way to go back to my roots. So as we started, I became a team leader and a program manager for the team that was actually, at that time, Boeing knew that they would be transitioning to a composites airplane. So they asked me if I would be the team leader to change all their instructional materials from metals and transfer them over to composites. So we would have both, depending on which site we were at. So I took that on. I did that for about 6-7 years, but then I realized that no one had a material science program for composites. So I approached Edmonds Community College, and we had a wonderful vice president and president there, Dr. O'Hara and Dr. Mosier, who supported it. And we said, okay, let's look at some potential funding. And so we went and we found the National Science Foundation under the ATE program. So we wrote the proposal. I was still with Boeing at the time, and I helped them get that proposal. And then they came back to me and said, would you take it on? And I said, I was looking for a new challenge at the time. We'd already gotten everything into place about changing the instructional materials and whatnot. So I said yes. So I came over to the Shoreline Community College, which was my first one, which was manufacturing, which helped me kind of set the stage for where we wanted to go with material science. And then I moved over to Edmonds Community College where we got our ATE. That was in 2005, 2004. I've been working with material science ever since, and everything I did with Boeing and the production company that I was at before going into this area was all around materials. So I was the only female that managed the biggest printing company on the West Coast. It was very strange for me to walk into a room like this and have everybody in this room be male except for me. And obviously I was also Latina, so they didn't always take my input until they realized that I did not back down. That's what my parents taught me, is if I was right, I was right. And I think that helped me throughout the whole process. But where I want to lead into here is when I started my ATE journey with NSF, I began to realize that had I had NSF when I was in school, it would have made a big difference of how I got to where I got to and the struggles that I had. I see it now in my students, in our students, material science. We actually established the first material science program in our state. We've now got 11 colleges in our state working together. This is a state of Washington, where colleges would not speak to each other. And that is because we're all autonomous and we all fight for the same funding dollars. So they do talk to each other, but they're oftentimes where they will not collaborate with each other. We've gotten 11 colleges under this grant that we have under the Material Science Center, under ATE, to talk to each other. We now have established a core of composites programs that all 11 colleges will teach. Now that is very significant because when I was in industry, it was very irritating to me when I was in Auburn and we were doing the pieces and the parts there, and then I'd go to, say, the Everett plant, and I'd start working, and my students would say to me, why is it that I'm starting in Auburn, I've been transferred to Everett, and I have to start my classes all over again because they're not teaching the same classes and the same topics, and you're shaking your head, right? It's very, very frustrating to students. That in itself is a challenge. So that's one of the challenges that we took on. We're not at the same course numbering system yet in our state, but we did get the core through, and that was a big help. And I truly believe if I had not had NSF's weight behind me, pushing us forward with ATE, we would not have gotten that far. And so now I'm glad to say that several of the colleges in the state are also going for grants because they see how it helps their students and how it moves them forward. So we've expanded the program. I talk about Washington State, but I also work with Virginia, work with California, Oklahoma, your state. We work with many composites programs and many material science programs around the country to get them to this point. I don't believe that I could have gotten this far, and my team couldn't have gotten this far, to move it and move the dial to this particular area if we had not had the support and the work and the work that you all do here. It's fabulous. It's helped us move forward. And in fact, in the elevator as we were coming up, Dallas and I were having this conversation. I was just in Tulsa. We did a workshop for high school teachers that want to know more about STEM and composites and materials. And so we did that. Just 2-3 weeks ago, we had a full house. They want to know more about what's going on. So now we're talking about, I'm going to get him in contact with the STEM person that's doing this because what he's doing with that area, the teachers would love to know about what's happening. So why not do this? Why not do this collaboration? Why not? This is what we do. And I think that's one of the underlying factors within NSF-ATE. We share, and we share quite a bit. I just want to say thank you for that. I think that one of the things that Dallas said, I can't even expand on in the sense that you're absolutely correct, Dallas. When I would talk to students, especially when they were with Boeing and we were having them go back to school to learn about composites, the minute you said science, it's what we call the white knuckle reaction. They'd be sitting there with their hands like this, and pretty soon you could see their hands just gripping the things when we're talking about math and science and whatnot. And we'd say, okay, we have to stop talking about this. We have to find a different way to talk about this because these folks were really good. They were very smart. They knew what they were doing. They knew every process in the company. Some of these folks is what we call blue streak. Are you familiar with the term blue streak by any chance? Blue streak is the term at Boeing that we used to use when we had an AOG. Familiar with AOG? Many of you have probably been on it. Airplane on the ground. It means we have a problem. So I was in Auburn and we were the responsive team. So what we would do is we had a group of folks, kind of like Dallas, who did the machining and the robotics and whatnot. When we had an AOG, we would pull them all together. We'd say, this is the problem. And within minutes, they could actually start developing the process. Then we would fly that part, if it was a broken part, to that plane and get it ready to go. When you're sitting on the plane for 5 or 6 hours, that is not a fun time. So we felt like you were all our customers. So, but that's the responsive piece. And those were the people that we wanted to continue. By having just an associate's degree, or I hate the term the sub-associate, I hate the term sub. These are associate's degree. They've worked hard to get these. And if we can get them to understand that they can continue on and go into, just because it's an ATE program or it's funded by ATE or it's a 2-year program, that is not the end of their world, right? That just opens up their world. And if we can keep nurturing that piece, we can still have what we want on both sides. We want the folks that want to do the 4 years in the research and have that mind, but we also need the technicians and the folks that fix your cars and do the robotics and do GPS, do our AOGs, get them off the ground, those kinds of things. Those are very important. And so I think the work that we're doing is fabulous. And every time I talk about ATE and National Science Foundation, everything it's doing, people perk up because they know that things are happening, there's changes happening, and this is a good thing. So I'm going to close with saying the same thing. Science is broad and often misunderstood and sometimes feared. And what we're working towards is making sure science is a part of this whole integration piece of STEM. And once you say STEM, that seems to align some of those fears. So that's where we want to go with this. So, and ATE does a fabulous job of integrating science into STEM, so it does not become a fearful topic, as is engineering to some folks. So anyway, I'll end there, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cosette. Mr. Mel Glover, please.
Hey, thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Cordova, Dr. Wilson, Dr. McCrary, and esteemed NSF board members. I appreciate the invitation and the ability to exchange these ideas. A little bit of background from myself. I actually started my career on fast attack submarines. I don't know if you guys all read my biography, but I spent more than 5 years of my life underwater, 10 years completely on subs, and I learned a lot of both technology and the hydraulic mechanics associated with making the sophistication of a billion-dollar vessel work, operate, and attack at crushed depths. It's a pretty fascinating world to be in, and it inspired me in ways that I knew coming out of that situation that I could do anything. I remember coming to my very first civilian interview. It was very fascinating. It was sit in front of an old guy my age now. When I started my interview process, he had glasses, so he had his glasses down at the edge of his nose. And he told me, "So, Mr. Glover, tell me a time when you had a project fail, and what'd you do to solve for that?" And he pulled his glasses off, looked at me very intently, and I said, "Well," and I didn't. This is my first interview civilian, so I'm sitting at attention. You know what that looks like at the very edge of your seat. You're all buttoned up, and you're like this, right? So I'm sitting at attention, and I tell him, "Well, sir, we didn't call them projects, we called them missions, sir, and had I failed any, I wouldn't be sitting here because I would be dead." And he goes, "Oof. Question 2 is off." I said, "Sir, what is question 2? And he says, "Well, question 2 is how do you deal with stress?" It's a very, very fascinating world that I came from. And what's happened is, from the equipping of moving into the civilian world, and the fact that you don't have to speak in acronyms was quite fascinating. And of course, I moved into technology where everything's acronyms, so you could carry on full conversations without ever speaking an English word, which was pretty sad. I count myself blessed to be part of NSF. Actually, I'm a part of an ATE grant. I'm the chairman of the board for a business industry leadership team that governs the curriculum development for 60 colleges nationwide. We're in 23 states, and we're making a remarkable difference through your guys' grants to transform the world around us. And we do it at a community college level of engagement. One of the challenges, and I also served, has a little bit of background, I served on the White House's CTO roundtable, where this was during President Obama's administration, where they asked for CTOs around the world to spend time to tell them how they can create a program to get folks that were not degreed into the technology workforce. And we are the ones who developed the initiative called Tech Hire. If you're interested, you could go to the White House's website, and they have all the data there. What's fascinating about the whole conversation is we have kind of an epidemic that's happening where we keep ingesting, as America, we keep ingesting immigrants in to fulfill these $100,000+ a year jobs, when in fact we need to focus on educating the folks that are here. And I've heard the term used, blue-collar STEM, but the primary focus is really trying to get people, equip them early, and often, just as the other two panelists have talked about, saying that, hey, this is a pathway. There is hydromechanics, electric mechanics, electronics. All of these pieces are the founding blocks of how everything operates today. And those degree programs, the community college degree programs, help us get there. So the thing that about NSF that I feel that I'm blessed about being a part of this organization is that this is the one organization, at least in my mind, that has the ability to blend education with industry and government, which they're almost like not, they're almost, you put that magnetic resonance conversation we were having earlier to polar opposite magnetic, they just themselves away from each other. Education only wants to be education for themselves. Industry only wants to do industry for itself. Government wants to do government policy for itself. And NSF has this unique way to blend all of those things together. So as Congress transitions and the White House transitions, I look at that as strengths for us to say that NSF is that key mechanism to holding industry together, and we're the forefront at delivering, because I'm equipping with the knowledge, skills, and abilities that I need to hire. I'm telling the community colleges exactly what I want to see in students. They're crafting the curriculum specifically for those, and I'm hiring those students. So it's a complete round robin in the ability to go forward. So I'm going to use a quick example. One of the students I hired, we do a program that's, I call it an upside down degree, which means they're going to give you the ability to get industry certifications that are recognized by the industry, A+ certifications, Security Plus certification, I don't know if you're familiar with all this stuff, CCNA, all of these interesting networking certifications. We give them the ability to get those in the first year. And as soon as they get those certifications, they're hireable. They're hireable by industry that moment. And what I find fascinating about that is one of the young ladies I hired, she had just finished her CCNA but did not have her associate's degree. But I brought her on, and she went from making $12,000 a year at whatever job she was working at to making $45,000 a year, which is where I started her at. And then from the $45,000, I incentivized her. I said, great, you're here without a degree. Once you get your associate's degree, I'm going to give you $5,000 more. When you get your bachelor's degree, I'm going to give you $15,000 more a year. So I put her on an accelerated plan so that she could continue her education and continue to move up the line. Well, today, 2.5 years later, she's making $90,000 a year with just an associate's degree. So it's possible, it's practical, it's here, and it's now. And the challenge that I had also is in technology, we have a problem where technology teams are run by white men or Indian men. That's pretty much it. You're either white or you're Indian. And you look at most IT groups, they're pretty much always like in the 30s, white or Indian in general. And that's a travesty. Let me point out why that's a travesty. One of the colleges, the University of North Texas, had a boot camp for middle school, and they were trying to focus on middle school girls. Okay, so they made all their flyers pink, hot pink. And they said, hey, we'll teach you how to program an iPhone app in a 2-week boot camp, right? They send this mass market, their little pink flyers everywhere. And the professor was sharing the story with me, and he said, it was really funny, hot pink flyers, and more than half of the people who showed up were boys. So, but they did have a group of girls. And then they went for the first 3 days of the 2-week boot camp was for them to invent something very similar to the open-minded, whatever, invent an app that you want to create. So the first 3 days was going through the invention, and then the next week and a half was focused on building the app and them giving practical application on how to build a mobile app. And then the last day was showcasing the app you developed. He goes, what was really fascinating is a 3-girl team won the competition. And I said, oh yeah, what did they develop? And he goes, well, they developed an app that allows them to take a picture of their fingernail with their phone. And then they could apply different colors and patterns on their finger and figure out what it is that they really like before actually painstakingly going through the process of painting their nails. And I thought, his point wasn't to make me think this, but here's what I walked away from that conversation. How many, as a chief technology officer and CIO and a senior executive for many years, how many times have I needed a different perspective to solve a business problem and did not have the ability to think Because in a million years, I could never think of an app that did that. I couldn't do it. It's not within me. I don't have that capability. I acknowledge my weakness, and I need to put around me people who can think that way. And I think one of the biggest critical components is trying to get folks on your team, on your technology team, that are both young and old and diverse across the spectrum, so that folks can go, hey, have you thought about it this way? And so when you come up with a business problem, and interestingly enough, I run a 100% cloud-based organization. We make about $600 million a year, and it's run by 60 people. Think about that for a second. 60 people, $600 million, no office. So everybody is dependent on technology. So every business problem is a technology problem. And if I don't diversify my team with either the right set of folks, then I've got a weakness in my team that I can't solve for until I do that work. Does that make sense? And so when I think about NSF and I think about the ability to bridge those mechanisms and those gaps that I see in the industry, you guys are sitting at the forefront. A couple of other things that I want to talk about. And one of the items I was really interested in having you guys ask me questions. So hopefully we'll be able to get to that in just a second. So NSF allows both the education of front two-year degrees and four-year institutions to provide what I think is the cure for America's poverty. Higher education in America allows joblessness and low-income jobs to be transformed into meaningful careers that can pull those people in poverty completely out of poverty. If I can just get one, like the young lady I talked to you about, I hired. She moved from $12,000 a year to $90,000 a year in 2.5 years. That's inspiration for those people that are still in the same bad neighborhood or in the same situation going, wait, if she could do it, so can I. And then all of a sudden the conversation starts happening in those run-down middle America or lower-end America neighborhoods going, hey, you know, now I don't have to try and become some basketball superstar or some rap star. I can actually depend on science to get me there. And I can see people in my own neighborhood moving into that line. Those are real things that can happen today. And we have the workforce in America to do this work. They just don't know it. Which is why my comment earlier today was sometimes NSF's got so many great things going, but we really don't advocate what a great job that we're doing to incentivize folks to be on board. And Dallas, to your earlier point, you probably didn't even know NSF was behind some of the work that was being done until you were brought into one of these kind of engagements. Which is what I'm finding student after student after student that I talk to, they did not know NSF did this work. And how critical it is at the grassroots level on what we're doing to transform the world around us. So, a couple of things, and I have answers to all of your questions that you can ask me later because I'm going to skip past a lot of that stuff. There's a couple of critical success patterns that I've looked at over the years. One is the involvement of stackable certificates. Industry, especially in technology, this may not be true for biosciences and other things, but in technology, industry recognized stackable certificates, not college certificates, but stackable certifications from industry recognized organizations is huge. That gets you employed. There's a bunch of automation that's going on right now, so when somebody comes up with a recruiting for a job, 400 applicants will go through it. The systems will cull through and say, if you don't have this cert, we don't even want to talk to you. So you automatically get discarded. Upside down degrees, I talked a little bit about that. Students are abandoning colleges and moving to boot camps and MOOCs, which are massive open online courses. And they've moved into that sector because people like me will hire them without a degree. It's happening more and more. So if we can latch on to the relevance of those institutions and then pivot so that we have that academic career pathway so they can continue to move forward, they're not our enemy. They're actually a part of the solution for getting those folks in poverty out of poverty and not having them go into debt. The other thing is that young lady that I hired, as soon as I hired her, my company paid $5,000 a year for her tuition. No amount of time. $5,000 a year for her tuition. So as she continued to move up in her degree path, she ended up with zero debt, which is huge because now the businesses are solving for it. Yeah, I have other focus areas I want to talk about: H-1B visas, veterans, women's stuff. But I'll conclude my comments and open it up for questions.
Thank you very much. So I believe we have now opened this up we have some time for some questions, and I'd like to start off with the first question. We hear from the media, we've seen reports that have recently come out, particularly like the report that just came out from Georgetown that talked about good jobs that pay without a BA. And so there is an attraction there. Yet at the same time, we hear businesses like yours say they can't find enough of these people. And what do you see, and opening up to the whole panel, as the obstacles, both legislatively, culturally, and otherwise, that impedes or dissuades students and incumbent workers from pursuing these jobs in these areas, okay, or getting the certification/education that they need?
Okay, so just speaking from a student perspective, and my oldest daughter's 18. She just graduated high school and is enrolled in a community college this next semester. So don't feel old enough to have an 18-year-old daughter, but I've suggested science type career or academic path for her, and she's never really seen herself as that type of person. So I think one of the, and I've noticed that in other students that I talk to, maybe they perceive science and engineering as too difficult, or the IT, technical careers as more technically challenging than they're up for, that they're able to tackle. Maybe just self-perception is one of the major things that I've seen.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I'll give you real world. I ran into a student, she was a police officer, wanting to re-skill herself in the world around her, and she really wanted to look at technology as a new pathway for her success and get out of police work. She did not fully understand or appreciate that, first of all, she was bucking the system because she was a police officer and female. And when she got to her career counselor, the career counselor told her, oh, you should be an administrative assistant. And so she looked up administrative assistant and found out, well, I already make more than that as a police officer, so I really don't want to do that. It feels like I'm going backwards. But there was a mentor, which I've heard happen a couple of times with both of you guys. A mentor said, well, why don't you just get into network engineering? And when those words were spoken to her for the first time, she started thinking about herself as a network engineer. And so one of the big things that I think we're missing in various colleges around the world is make sure that we have STEM placement counselors. Because if you don't have anybody believe in you, or believe that you can be anything other than what your mother was or your father was, and if you have the skills and the aptitude to do it, why do you have to be pigeonholed to one thing or the other? Why can't you be an astronaut? Why can't you be whatever you want to be? And there's no limit to hold you back. So STEM career placement counselors that focus on those roles and believe in those students, I think, is a critical path. And if there's some way that NSF can influence that would be great.
I'd like to add to that. I did read the report. One thing I found very interesting was that even though they did this research, one of the questions I still had when it was done was, it talked about folks that had BAs were coming back and getting some of those manufacturing jobs, but it never did really align whether the person graduated with a BA in manufacturing or was it in something else, and they chose not to do that. So there was no alignment. To me, that was like a big gap. There's no alignment to where they're coming back, because we're reading a lot about white collars moving into blue collar jobs because less hours. And I have to tell you, one of the things that I did in my career is when I was the female production manager, I took a 70% pay cut to leave industry because I was working 60 to 70 hours a week. And although I had a lot of bonuses and the money was coming in, I didn't have a life. And so I decided to leave there. Thank goodness I had a wonderful owner, because I reported directly to the owner of the company, and he gave me a great severance package to help pay for my entire master's program, because he also valued education, and I found the right person, right? So I wanted to honor him with that. But the second thing is that once you go through that change, I took a job as administrative assistant because I knew that I loved education. I knew I wanted to finish my degree, and I also knew that when I got there at 7:30 and I left there at 3, I was done, and I could do my schoolwork. So I finished my master's program in 13 months with the support of my family. So those are kinds of things you have to make those decisions, and sometimes it's kind of I remember sitting there talking to my husband saying, I can't believe they want me to take a 70% pay cut to do this. But after I slept on it, I said, this is the right thing for me to do. And of course, now look at where I am now. In PI, I have one of the largest centers within ATE and the only materials program, and I've had all this experience with all these companies that I've worked with. But the second thing I want to say is yesterday when I was flying in, I had the privilege to sit next to a young man, kind of like Dallas, who said to me, we were talking, and I said, so what do you do? And we were talking, and he said, I'm the executive director for a transit company, a nonprofit. It's a company that manages our bus system, our public transportation, correct? I said, oh. I said, have you done that for a long time? He goes, no, I've only been there a year. I said, what did you do before? He goes, I was a science teacher. And I said, and you left science? He goes, I make a heck of a lot more money. That wasn't the term he used, but he said, I'm not killing myself. I'm not working the extra hours. He said, all I got was a very low salary and a very high debt when I left school. And had I known that, I probably wouldn't have done that. But this is the sad part, is this is an area we need. When we talking about science, this is your area. And so how do we keep them? And part of NSF's mission is this teacher preparatory, preparation for teachers, is how do we look at some of these other ones, not just ATE, but how do we integrate it into these other pieces that says we need to keep these teachers interested. We need to keep them focused. We need to keep them, need them is what we need to do, and let them know that we don't want them just to teach and incur debt. We want them to teach our students who are going to be our future workforce. Because again, I come from the blend of education and workforce, so that's what I keep looking at. So I just wanted to share that. And when I fly, I ask a lot of people a lot of questions. So anyway, but one of the questions I used to get with Boeing all the time, because I used to wear my bag all the time that said Boeing. And when I would go to fly, I'd be standing in line and somebody would say to me, oh, I see you work with Boeing. I bet you know which seat to sit in. And I would say, no, I know which one not to sit in.
So I'd like to open this up for questions.
Are you going to tell us which seat not to sit in?
No, because if I do, I have to fight you for it every time.
So I really like the comments about mentorship. I think the kids who discover somebody believes that they can do more than they've done can make an enormous difference. That feedback loop occurs over and over and not enough. With regard to teachers and student debt, I wonder whether the student loan program isn't the subprime mortgage of our time. We're doing terrible damage to people by selling them the idea that if you go to college and get a 4-year degree, everything will be wonderful. And you've just illustrated a different path, which I think is a very important one, especially to get science done. We need people with technical skills, but they don't necessarily have to be nuclear physicists in order to be productive. So I wish that there was a way to we recorded this, but I would like to get you in front of a camera, record your stories, and then make sure that our members of Congress hear those stories, because they need to understand the importance of science from your perspective. Because it really means something, and they all care about jobs, which is one of the reasons that we're interested in this whole notion of STEM workforce. So thank you all for coming and sharing with us.
And I think we will get that video, because I think that's a great idea. Carl?
I'm Carl, by the way, if you can't read. I tried to put it where you could see it, but it's not easy. Anyhow, first, thank you all for coming. But Matt raised a thing in my mind that I hadn't thought of, and I want to just ask the three of you about it. Your description of stackable certificates implied something that I think is very important, which is in the process that one is entering on, you have multiple exit points which aren't viewed as failures.
Absolutely.
And it strikes me that that is an essential feature of anything that we talk about. And I'd love to get your elaboration. Am I nuts? I should have thought of it earlier.
No, it's true. I think the challenge that we have, and you guys are more experts at this than I am, but government-run items say that if I don't have a degree, I'm a failure, and that's not necessarily the measurement that I care about. It's, do I have a job, and do I have a job in technology, and did I complete the certificate to get that job? There are so many people hungry out there for, and I'm talking about businesses that are hungry out there for educated or skilled laborers that may not have the degree behind them, but skilled laborers to come do technology work for them, that there are agreements just like Boeing has that other colleges partner with other businesses, and they put them through a pipeline, and as soon as they get through like their third class, the businesses are hiring them away because they have so much demand at the business. They just want the skill. They know that after they get through this third semester, they have the skills, and they hire 100% of the students get hired. And so when you think about it that way, and you have that certificate level, then it's not only about that one business. As an industry recognized certificate, you can now put that so they have an exit plan at each stage and income at each stage as they progress. And you can move from a CCNA, which is an entry-level network engineer, to CCIE, where you're getting paid $185,000 a year. Those are all stackable certificates. And you don't need a degree to be a CCIE. And you get $185,000 without 1 day of college.
Thanks. Your answer part, I'd love to get the other views on that same issue of multiple exits.
For us, and I will again talk about the material science program that we established through NSF. Of course, we had the only one in the state, but one of the things that we wanted to do was have an internship program, because it was so we developed a 1-year certificate where students could do that, and that was the same. We had the same challenges. Was companies would come and try and take our students, because our students in the first quarter of their first year, they already have hands-on experience. They're in the lab. What we were finding with some of the other programs, 4-year programs, that's not what was happening. We would have students who were in their 3rd year coming to our lab wanting to get on a piece of equipment because they've never even had a chance to touch it at the university level. So we found out that was a good audience for us, that we could talk to them and tell them what was going on. And so they would send some of their other students and their other friends to come see us, to play on our machines. But my point is that we did start an internship program with Boeing. That was the model. It can be used by any company, anywhere, anytime, any program, because we created it. Dr. George Parker and myself created it. And what they do is, if they do their first year and they do their internship and they complete their 3 quarters, if they want to have an internship, they have to be in good standing. They have to be enrolled in the program, and Boeing won't take them until they finish their at least 2nd year. And if they do, they will come in between their first and their 2nd year, but the guarantee from the student is they will go back for their 2nd year, and Boeing will pay for that. So it's a great win for them, and they get to pick which lab they want to work in. So it's a great win for them. So it's developing those stackable certs, but also developing a pathway for them to be successful at any point in time. Even if they choose to leave, they're still successful. It's a mindset. And so we want that good mindset out in the world, so out in industry.
I know we recognize you all. We have Dr. Jerry Richmond on the line, I believe. You have a question?
Yes. Thanks for letting me in. And I just have to say how inspirational all of your talks are. I'm here with Vicki Chandler at the airport, and we're just giggling about the fingernail app, and also just delighted to hear your story. My question has to do with something that we as a committee have been talking about, and that is our concern that that parents and people in your community might see a community college degree as something that has a lot lower value than a bachelor's of science degree or bachelor's of arts degree at a university, whereas our committee recognizes that actually in some respects it can be a better avenue and a faster avenue to a paying job, and you have all really well-paying job that you have all talked about. And so I'd like your perspective on whether you think that you might call it a stigma associated with a college degree is going away with time, or do you, what's your perspective on it? Do you hear things like that, or what's your perspective?
Yes, answers your question. One of the things I had written here that I meant to say earlier was technician education does not receive the same level of respect as a 4-year degree, which is what you're talking about. The interesting thing is, again, when I was growing up, my dad was a union person and worked for the Northern Pacific Railroad. So he was a journeyman. And in those days, journeymen were like your bachelor's degrees. They were honorable positions. They'd worked hard for them. They'd passed every test. They'd done everything. It's not quite so true anymore. And yet, the stigma of having to have a community college, a 4-year, seems to be pressing. What we're finding with parents is that I do a lot of work with the Latino community in our area because I live in our college is in Snohomish County, which has a large Latino population. Anytime we do an event, we bring the parents in as well because we want them to be familiar with what their students are going to be going through and the fact that these programs, these 2 years, and these certificates in 2 years could give them a very livable wage, a very honorable wage. And that's very important to the community as they work together and they're growing and they're going into leadership programs in that community. So I think that as parents, we always have to include the parents, at least in this community. I think the more we do that and the more we try and get to the parents, they're going to understand more and more that it's not the bachelor's, and I hate to say this in this way, but it's not the end all. It's actually the starting point of many things. So having an associate's degree is fabulous. And, I think one of the things that struck me when I started working with the Latino community is that when we would host events and we would bring the parents in, we would invite the parents to come. It struck me odd that they would call me and ask me if they had to bring their green card to be able to come into our building. We are a community college. We are a community college. The immigration was so hard there and so tight that they wouldn't come if they were fearful, and they wouldn't send their students, their children, because they would not put them in a situation such as that. So we tried very hard. Wow. Our president is Latina, Dr. Jean Hernandez, and she helped us establish some of those processes with them to let them know that this is really important. The parents do need to be involved. And when I say Latinos, I mean across the board. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. Across the board, the parents really need to become educated. The other thing I will say is we stopped in manufacturing in our state, at least I do when I make presentations with students. I never tell them, I never say, manufacturing is not the dirty, dingy, repetitive task that you think about. Well, you have to remember, these kids are 17, 18. They have no frame of reference. We're instilling that frame of reference to them. All they see is the robotics. That's what we want them to know about. We talk to them and say, manufacturing is robotics, high-tech, clean, manufacturing. I mean, we go into that. And I find that people who start giving them those impressions, I mean, they're 17. They've never set foot on a manufacturing floor, so they don't know whether it's clean or dirty. But we're giving them this image already, so we need to stop doing that as a part of our education.
Yeah, and being from the Northwest myself, from Oregon, the young people think of having to work in wood products or some kind of timber mill or something like that in order to get a good job. So I'm particularly sensitive to that issue, and I really appreciate that you're bringing parents into this because, as you know, they can be such a forceful element in what a student decides to do.
I was just going to briefly add to that the long-standing opinion or a lot of students think that all you need is a degree, and once you get that degree, then you're successful or you'll go out into the world and have a good career. But it depends what degree you have, and also there are a lot of things that community colleges provide, certifications even, that are much more valuable. So I think it's all probably been said.
And I would say that our articulation agreements are hugely important, not only from the high schools up to the community college, but the community college being able to diversely articulate to other four-year institutions, so that just like Mel was talking about, that we don't get into a situation where they feel like, well, if I go to a four-year institution, all of my previous degree or all my previous credits aren't valuable. But if you get really strong articulation agreements, as soon as they get done with their 2 years at a community college, you can go right into a four-year university. But the great benefit of the stackable certifications and the fact that you're going through a 2-year degree is you're spending $1,200 or $1,500 for your lower degree, where it might cost you $5,000 or $10,000 for a boot camp, and it might cost you $12,000 to $25,000 a year for a four-year institution. So when you look at each semester, when you look at each of these different pathways, the right path is, in my opinion, the community college path, because it gets you, as long as that community college has those articulation agreements, and then being able to advertise that. So if at the NSF, if you guys could focus, when folks come out with an ATE grant, and they say, hey, I've got this great idea, I got this great grant, that's great, then how many articulation agreements do you have with your upline and, quite frankly, your high schools to prepare for that?
Well, I want to thank all of you all. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. I will offer that some of us will be here after this meeting ends to talk about this more, so we'll be sticking around, and I'll turn this back over to you, Maria.
Great, thank you, and thank you all for sharing your insights with us. It was absolutely fascinating. Okay, I want to thank everybody here who has helped this busy board meeting go so well. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this is our last board meeting in this building. For over 20 years, this has been home to NSF and the NSB. And while we're excited about the new location in Alexandria, we're also grateful for the hospitality that Ballston and the local businesses have extended to us during our time here. Note that the November board meeting will be held at 2401 Eisenhower Avenue in Alexandria. Is there any other business to come before the board today? Okay, hearing no further business, the plenary open session is now adjourned.